So it is finally time. The finale is upon us. Well, actually, it was upon us like 2 months ago, but a lot of real life stuff happened in between then and now. So I watched this live on the plane from Seoul to Munich and had a quite frankly awful experience at the Munich airport. I've also noticed that when I have a layover within Europe, I don't need a double security check, but when I've been on a plane for 11 hours from Seoul, suddenly there's a double security check. Where, pray tell, was I supposed to have gone from the check in Incheon to now? The staff at the airport were also so unnecessarily rude to the non-Europeans. Like, an older group in front of us were clearly planning on going backpacking or hiking, and the staff at the airport just, I don't have time, and this isn't the video to get into it, but they confiscated this woman's homemade gochujang paste and just threw it out. It clearly passed the check in Seoul, but suddenly it's contraband. And the girl right after us, mind you, we were the two white girls separating these two groups of Koreans, got a random passport and boarding pass check. She had one tiny little purse with nothing in it except like a lip gloss. I forgot an entire roll-on perfume in my carry-on and I didn't get stopped, but a lip gloss got her passport checked. Not to mention the actual immigration control lady who started arguing with a woman about her needing a visa just from seeing her Chinese passport and refusing to listen when the woman tried to explain that she's going to China. These weren't even things that happened to me, but the double standard was very much felt. And they use the excuse of the Euros taking place in Germany, but again, no double check when I was coming from Iceland, when I'm pretty sure Iceland and Korea have about the same amount of international you-know-whats. All this to say, don't go to the Munich airport if you can help it. I also wanted to take this opportunity to let those of you who are not already aware know that there is currently a Telegram scandal unfolding in Korea where men of all ages are producing deepfake material of celebrities, friends, classmates, sisters, mothers, daughters, as well as touching, exposing, and even drugging them. This is not the same as the Anthroom case of 2020, but very similar. I will encourage all of you who can to spread awareness of this issue and to help combat the misinformation spreading on social media. In the description, you can find resources related to this. There will also be a link to a survey about Island 2, which you can answer if you want. It is a bit long, but if you want to share your thoughts on the show in a more structured manner, you can do it there. Anyways, the actual episode, what can I say? It for sure happened. Sorry, I paid for airplane Wi-Fi for the first time ever, and why is it actually awful and I missed the entire opening performance of Final Love Song? Let's start from the beginning, because we're basically caught up to the present. The Mnet editors didn't have the reactions to the mission announcement ready for the last episode. If you remember, that ended with live eliminations, so obviously. So they uploaded that reveal about 3 days after the episode aired and then put it at the very beginning of this episode. The final mission is the Produced by Teddy mission, which is the most involvement that man has had in the show to date. We then get like an extended intro with Hanbin recapping everything so far in part 2 before a final teary-eyed goodbye between the finalists and Sujong and Juwon. But then they do another intro right after that. This show's structure is so unnecessary. I also realized that they probably switched to a 10-person finale because they wanted the final songs to have an equal amount of members. I get it, and I also don't, because that kind of feels like they realized in the middle of the show that they messed up and retconned it. Anyways, the finale actually opens with a performance of Final Love Song with Jimin as the center, which feels like they're trying to prepare us for something. So we can all acknowledge that this performance was not live in the slightest, right? Like, none of these girls are that good. Obviously, there's been some backtrack throughout the show so far, but this performance was just fully lip-synced, and half of them are just not good lip-syncers. Despite their improvements, Mai, Jimin, Coco, and Sebi are not good enough vocalists to pull this song off so cleanly. I'm also fairly certain Mai and Coco at least had their vocals mixed with Jungwon's a little bit because those were not their vocal tones. It's honestly just funny that I'm not trying to pull that one. Then the rest of the 14 girls show up for the final chorus, and it's supposed to be this huge moment, but I'm too distracted by the vocals, or lack thereof. Why wouldn't you just give a majority of the lines to Jiyoon, Jungin, Sarang, Fuko, and Cutie? They can actually sing live, and honestly, only Sarang and Jungin look okay lip-syncing. The other three are clearly not used to it. I just don't get the decision-making process here, especially because it could have been like a full circle moment for Jiyoon and to a lesser extent Fuko and Cutie, because the original Final Love Song mission was their defining performance and something they fought to improve on the entire show. Is it just me? Like, I'm sorry, but you do have 4 to 5 pretty damn solid vocalists left on the show, and aside from Jungin, they're not getting killing parts, they're not getting high notes, they're not getting any vocal showcase moments, but, and I mean absolutely no offense to the girls, Coco and Sebi are? We're off to a bad start. After another intro, they introduce the MCs, who then go on to introduce themselves. It's Hanbin and Somi, by the way. This episode has had like 5 intros already. They then cut to Zero Base 1 members, Jo Yuri, and Kepler's Cheon and Hikaru in a special audience section. Intro number 6. And then the girls walk on stage in their performance outfits. They're all wearing a brown grayscale, and it's just different styles, but doesn't really make any of them stand out at all, and I'm not a fan. Then they announced that only 6 girls will be in the final lineup, 5 voted and 1 by producer's choice. I honestly hate finales, not because the show is over, but because they drag it out so much. The time spent on finales should be spent on introducing the contestants early on. I said what I said. We go back to the stage backgrounds, which is where we see last episode's top 3, Jimin, Jungin, and Jiyoon, struggle to communicate because they're all introverts. It's cute. Gyuri attempts to cheer herself up by hyping up her solo room, but her heart's not in it. The next day, they're called down to the lobby where the final mission songs are revealed. Drip is a hip-hop inspired Jersey club song. I don't know genres, but those are the keywords that come to mind. It's kind of like if New Jeans' Super Shy had more hip-hop influence, and also a grating sample that repeats over and over. It also features production and arrangement from 24 along with Teddy and others. Fake It has more of that retro synth-pop influence with some slight pop-rock tinge that we've been hearing throughout the show, so it's no surprise that this is the song Vivian had a heavier hand in alongside Teddy. Honestly, this mission being called Produced by Teddy just because he finally got involved in the songs feels really disingenuous. But then they try to salvage it by saying the units and parts were 100% chosen by Teddy, and I'll get into why that's still not enough when we get to the relevant part. They reveal the parts for each team simultaneously, but I'll make things easier and reveal them one by one. In Drip, we have Jimin as the center, then Jiyoon as the main vocal, shocking everyone. Clearly, the producers aren't done testing Jiyoon and they want to see how she does in a more hip-hop concept. For the main rapper, we have Coco, surprising no one. All the girls agreed the part fit her well. In part 4, which is like the secondary rapper, we have Yuju. By this, I feel it becomes clear that Yuju will not be a main rapper in the final lineup, which essentially means she won't be in the final lineup. The 5th and last part goes to Gyuri, surprising everyone again. It's only now that the girls realize Teddy is testing them in new concepts and new positions. In Fake It, Sebi is chosen as the center, so it seems there's one more test for her and Jimin to be compared as centers. Jungin becomes the main vocal for Fake It. I feel like this was a chance for her to redeem herself from Lovesick Girls and also prove she can fit the same songs as Jiyoon and vice versa, because after the last vote, it's pretty likely the two will be in the final group together. In a twist, the main rapper for Fake It is Sarang, who has not showcased rap since Unforgiven, which wasn't even a rap. Again, part 4 is a rap part, and they decide to give it to Fuko, which is certainly a choice, because she has not shown any semblance of a rap performance this entire show. And clearly that only leaves Mai as the 5th position in Fake It. This doesn't really shock people, as Mai would suit both songs. We start with Fake It, where both Fuko and Jungin volunteer as the leader. While Fuko is a really supportive leader, Jungin is a more efficient one, so they go with Jungin, but this really highlights to me the problem with survival show leaders. Oftentimes, the audience will base their preference for the final group leader on who leads the best performance on the show, but that does not make them the best choice for leader outside of the show. My favorite example of this is actually Kepler, because from the middle of the show, half the audience was convinced Daeon would be the leader because of her perfect leader edit. This completely neglected other factors such as Yujin having actual experience as an idol and being the oldest member, and Mashiro managing to lead every team she was in to a win in every mission. Guess who ended up being the official leader and co-leader? The ones who showed leadership capabilities beyond the survival show. Being a good performance leader does not necessarily translate to being a good group leader, and I think Mnet may have used this perception of the average viewer to their advantage when it comes to Team Fake It and their narrative. While the others laugh at Sebi's lack of coordination with Jungin, Mai goes up to the video and tries to analyze what Sebi's doing wrong. She figures it out, communicates it, but the others seem to be goofing off a little too much for her, as she's the only one keeping a straight face trying to work it out. I think this highlights exactly what I was saying. A good performance leader isn't necessarily a good leader. Now the girls are also close, they just want to goof off and make jokes, and Mai is the only one keeping things going, or so it seems, so this gives her a reliable leader image. Pair this with her framing throughout the show as this rock-solid, unshakable person constantly working hard to improve, willing to take any part as long as it means the team does well, you get the image of a leader to the average survival show viewer. But honestly, Sakura got essentially the exact same edit, and I don't remember any Produce 48 viewer hyping her up to be the final group leader, but I think that has to do with her unrefined dance skills compared to Mai, so she couldn't contribute in the same way. In Drip, the team, mostly Jiyoon, struggles to pick up the choreo. They keep moving moving on to new parts before fully grasping them because Coco mostly picks up the choreo so quickly. I am not a dancer, I am not even close to being a good dancer, but I feel like their strategy as a team is too individualistic and rushed. The few times I've had to learn choreo, I found it a lot easier to break it down into upper and lower body before moving on to formations and even formation changes. Watching this team is stressing me out. They're having fun, but it probably would have helped them to have someone like Mai who could ignore the atmosphere to analyze what's wrong. Fake It team then moves on to practicing vocals, and this is a survival show pet peeve of mine. I never understood why the girls would be hunched over, sitting down on the floor, trying to practice their vocals. Anyways, Fuko seems to get insecure hearing Sarang pull off her own rap. She flubs the lines during practice, and then it shows her worrying about her pronunciation in the confessional. And listen, I've seen a lot of comments about how she should have just sucked it up because Coco managed it, but that's completely ignoring the fact that Sebi, who studied in an English-speaking country, helped her. We saw her directly helping Coco during Lovesick Girls, and it was especially pointed out by Mnet as a contrast to Sujong's comments about not helping Mai. This time, Sebi's in a team with Fuko, but we get no sign that she offered to help Fuko with her pronunciation. I'm not saying that was her responsibility or that she owed it to Fuko or whatever, I'm pointing out the double standard from the viewers. Coco getting help with her pronunciation is completely erased from the narrative in order to say Fuko should have just tried harder, while the person who helped Coco back then is in the same team as Fuko now. We go back to Drip, where Jiyoon continues to struggle with picking up the choreo to the point she passes out on her bed and sleeps with her eyes open by the end of the day. We then see her talking to Coco in the laundry room about how slow she is, to which Coco encourages her. I do think survival shows in particular create wrong expectations about how easy it is to pick up a choreo, and that means Jiyoon is in a group where everyone is a fast choreo learner except her, and that makes her feel incredibly slow and behind. With time, obviously learning a choreo becomes easier, but I think it makes sense for a trainee who's been vocal focused to need at least a day more to learn the choreo. Sebi and Fuko then cheer each other on in bed with similar worries about not being able to do well. As we pan up to see the rooms in the middle of the night, the 10th and 12th place room is empty, meaning not even Gyuri is there. She's in the big practice room, practicing on her own late into the night, and eventually she falls asleep on the chairs the girls sit on during interim checks. And this was all just the first day and night of preparations. After this, we cut back to the live show where we see the announcement of the group name IZNA. Immediately IZ*ONE and ITZY come to mind, but the meaning is explained as myself, whenever, wherever, whatever, and can also be understood as is me. But then people started pointing out that it's also an anagram for a certain group of people synonymous with pure evil, and is it too late to get them to change it? We got Blit turned into Even. Surely this can also be fixed before they debut, right? It's not too late to change the name into Newtopia. But anyways, now it's time for the Fake It interim check, and I have some thoughts. I have some very strong thoughts that I don't think a lot of people are going to agree with, but I'll say them anyways. Firstly, overall, I think the vocal performance in this interim was very shaky. It was helped by them singing into the playback, which had the guide vocals still. Especially Sebi and Mai got a lot of help from it. If you separate the two vocal tracks, the live and the playback, you can hear how unstable they both are. You can also hear how Sarang struggles to regulate her breathing during her rap portion. It's not bad, she's just clearly not used to the type of breath regulation rapping needs. Fuko has a similar but not nearly as severe problem with her own part, and this is where I get controversial. Fuko's execution of the rap was not bad. I would even argue it was at a similar level as Sarang's in terms of basic execution. The only thing she lacked, in my opinion, was the emotion, but I also think that's completely understandable due to the fact that Fuko does not speak English. She was focusing on her pronunciation and flow, which we saw her struggle with in the background. Lacking the emotion will be fixed with a little more time to familiarize herself with the actual pronunciation. I will die on the hill that Fuko did not do badly when it comes to the rap, and she would have executed it flawlessly on stage. But let's get into why that didn't happen. 24 says the things he worried about didn't even stand out that much, particularly he said he was worried about Mai, but she didn't sound bad. Vivian compliments Sarang's rap tone, but then she says she wants to hear the others do Fuko's rap part. And they play it again, and I'm still just question marks, because she doesn't even sound bad. And I know I'm not being biased here, because I wasn't expecting a lot from her as a rapper, but she's literally not even that bad. I would even argue she's a better rapper than Sebi and Mai are vocalists, no shade. I even remember watching this part before seeing any outside comments and immediately being confused when Vivian suggested having someone else do it. Vivian justifies it, saying she wants to give it to someone who can give it more life, and that's when I know this has to be a setup from Mnet. Because why can none of the mentors even look at the girls during this? I'm not trying to start any conspiracy. I just don't believe they genuinely thought Fuko didn't suit this part. I also don't hear a huge difference in Jungin's execution versus Fuko's, so I'm just gonna go with the conspiracy that this was a setup to discredit Fuko and give Jungin another possible role in the final group. At least Fuko was relieved to get a singing part instead, but either this was a setup from Wake1 to prop up Jungin at Fuko's expense, a setup from Mnet to discredit Fuko in the last stretch, or Vivian and 24 set this up because Fuko getting the rap part and Jungin that singing portion went against their original vision for the song and they wanted to justify changing Teddy's decision. I'm leaning towards that one because they look so conspiratory in the interim. Anyways, I want to live in a world where Fuko performed that rap live because I think that would change a lot of people's opinions on her for the better. After Monica's suggestion of finding their own story within the lyrics, Jungin suggests analyzing the lyrics together and they come up with the interpretation that the narrator is a naive girl who fell for a bad guy and is trying to not be easily swayed by him. They do a little acting challenge with Sarang as the girl and Sebi as the bad guy and then start talking about their lack of relationship experience. But then Sebi decides to put Mai on blast and says she's the only one there with relationship experience. So then they land on the single most basic interpretation that every single survival show has come up with, this being I think the third time on this show alone. It's about their dream of becoming idols and the hardships of trainee life. But of course, these girls have little to no real life experiences, so obviously this would be the strongest association in their lives. I'm not bashing the girls for this conclusion, but I think it highlights the pitfalls of idols being artists without real life experiences because they spend their most formative years training. However, I think it also highlights that emoting is a skill because Fuko managed to apply fine to her lived experiences and delivered a very emotionally accurate performance despite the fact that she has not publicly experienced romantic heartbreak. As for the performance, this was not live either. You can't jump like that on stage and not hear it in their voices, especially not with their skills. I think they definitely had a live backtrack, which is a thing K-pop does sometimes, where they have a very raw recording with heavy breaths to mimic a live performance. But the point is, you can't perform that choreo while singing live and not have it affect your singing. So when I comment on their vocals, I will be focusing more on technique than their actual performance. And also, anybody else pissed off that this song doesn't have a bridge? Let's start with Sebi, probably the biggest benefactor of the backtrack, not because she can't sing live, but because her not singing live means she gets to focus on her expressions and interpretation of the dance. We need to be honest with ourselves. Sebi does not have the vocal skills to have sung any part of that performance live. We've seen in previous stages how unstable her voice is, how she defaults to throatiness, and what she sounds like doing lower notes, like what we hear in the intro, and higher notes like in both the chorus and second verse. These are not things that magically get fixed in just 2 weeks, especially not all at once. Her improving is definitely not out of the question, but it would take a proper vocal coach, not other trainees. Did I just now realize the show doesn't actually have a judge/producer/mentor who's vocal focused? But she did do her job as the center well. Her expressions conveyed the conflicting emotions of the song, and I found no fault in her dancing. However, I do think she needs some acting lessons to really refine her expressions. They're not bad, full of great potential, and there's a reason why people tag her as top 2 centers in the show, but there's room for improvement, and I think acting lessons would really help enhance her abilities for subtle expressions and emotions because they come off a bit exaggerated right now. Jungin was really good in this performance, but I'll be honest, and anyone who's typing out a comment about how I hate her or whatever can calm down because it's not that deep. I don't think she's that memorable in this performance. She's the main vocal, but I think her being given Fuko's rap did more harm to her performance than Fuko's. The highlight part for her was, in my opinion, the rap section. We haven't heard her rap much in the show, so I think she did fine enough, but not even that much better than Fuko did in the interim. It felt a bit bland, which is fine from someone without a lot of experience in rapping. It can be improved. Although her overall vocal performance was good, throughout the show, Jungin has showcased several crutches. Her most obvious one, in my opinion, is her throatiness. She has improved it as the show goes on. Her vocals have become a lot more open, but every time she's tasked with a more powerful note, it comes back because her technique engages her throat muscles. There's also her difficulties with falsetto and switching registers, which this song emphasized because of its frequent shifts between chest chest and head voice. It's not surprising that these problems are still noticeable just as they were 2 weeks ago, because these girls haven't had someone actually give them proper advice and training since the break at best. Her emoting has improved a lot from where we started, but I think that was her biggest obstacle in this stage. I find it likely that she was singing live over the backtrack, which probably impacted her ability to focus on expressions and dance interpretation. She's a good performer right now, and it won't take a lot for her to become a great one, but maybe she and Sebi could both benefit from acting lessons. Sarang was also someone I just didn't find very memorable on this stage. She did do really well in her rap, but this was a performance that really highlighted her lack of emoting skills because she only got the rap. She was too focused on the words and not the meaning, and her nervousness was really noticeable. I found it a shame that this is their last stage in the show and someone so well-rounded was given such a small part to play. Like, we have to admit, it's a bit ridiculous that Mai and Sebi were given choruses and Jungin and Sarang weren't. Like, usually your main vocal gets at least one chorus. But if they were focusing on the secondary vocals getting the chorus, why didn't Sarang get one? Weird decision making. Otherwise, if you only watch the full stage and aren't particularly focusing on Sarang, you can't really see her outside of her rap part. I feel like I can't really give her a fair judgment because she didn't get to showcase anything except her least developed skill. Such a shame. Now, let's talk about Mai. I'm a bit conflicted here. On one hand, I don't want to pile onto any hate she's received throughout the course of the show, but on the other hand, I think she still has a long way to go. Her foundations are really solid, especially dancing and stage presence, which is why I'm trying to choose my words really carefully so this doesn't just sound like hate. Mai is the second biggest benefactor of the backtrack, but her lack of technique is still noticeable. Her first pre-chorus didn't showcase her nasality issues at all, which I think added to the overall impact of that and caused most people to view her as the highlight of the performance. The chorus is the most obviously not live part of her performance because her second pre-chorus shows that her nasality and throatiness isn't gone. Again, this is something you need a proper vocal coach to work through. The difference between her first and second pre-chorus is like night and day, or day and night. It's disappointing because she has been working so hard to improve, and that is noticeable. She has shown remarkable improvement, but that is in spite of the show not providing her with a proper vocal coach. And I'll be very honest here, I don't think that is enough to say she's earned a spot in the final group. Improvement is great, and I definitely think we'll be able to see her continue to improve throughout the years we'll have with the final group, but I think it's also understandable that people were upset she made it into the final lineup when her skill level isn't held to the same standard as the others. But that does not mean I condone any hate towards her, don't twist my words. So that brings us to Fuko. I'm trying not to get into spoiling the lineup, but it's been like 8 years. Anyone who was paying attention to the show knows what happened. But I'm gonna focus on the performance. In my opinion, this definitely belongs in the category of good Fuko performances. Is there still room for improvement? Absolutely. All the girls have room for improvement. But I do think she showcased the highest level of skill in this performance, ironically. Her dancing doesn't deserve any complaints to me. Her vocals were really nice, and she moved nicely between registers, and her emoting definitely made her stand out as both a vocalist and performer. In all honesty, it seems she might have stuck with something closer to their original interpretation instead of the trainee life one. Her highlight to me was her chorus, where you can see and hear her move between the conflicting emotions. But you'll also notice, if you pay attention to her during other parts, that she was always on. She was interpreting every part of the performance, even if she wasn't in the center, which I can't really say applies to everyone in this performance. I think this was a really good performance from her. I would have liked to see a bit more variety in her expressions, but that's the only thing I would say someone else in the performance has her beat in. And I still think she would have slayed the rap part. I think I would rank them Fuko, Jungin, Sebi, Sarang, Mai. Which brings us to Drip Team, who are introduced as a team where every member has been the center. Their background starts early in the morning before the sunrise, with Jiyeon practicing by herself. Speaking from personal experience and actual statistics, that would mean she's practicing as early as 5:30 a.m., possibly a bit earlier. I just wanted to add this in here because I just realized it, but Jiyeon and I are both July Cancers, and that would mark the first time my bias and or one pick is actually born not only in the same month, but the same sun sign as well. It doesn't really have anything to do with anything, but it could explain why I see so much of myself in her. Back to the point. While Jiyeon does fine in the first verse, she still struggles past the first chorus, and Mnet highlights her unease when Jimin suggests they can get through it. Of course, because of the editing, it is a lot easier for us as the audience to notice how much Jiyoon is struggling, but I still find it fascinating how none of them noticed her being behind everyone else until it was too late. Like, even if you're not focusing on it, it's so obvious. Jiyoon becomes frustrated with herself and suggests she should go practice on her own while the others keep going at their pace before rushing out of the room. Now, this I 100% relate to because I also can't stand crying in front of people. Jimin follows her and gets Jiyoon to share her worries, which causes some back and forth apologies. Other members of the team also rush outside to apologize and comfort her, and they resume practice at a slower, more detailed pace. The next day, they start with some attitude method acting on the advice of the producers, looking at how unserious this whole thing is. I think the final group should definitely do some self-produced variety content like this. Like, as a challenge, if you laugh, you're out. Onto the performance, I think this team has some of the worst lip syncers. They all had some moments that made it really obvious that they weren't singing live, aside from the obvious parts like you would hear a difference in someone's voice if they're singing while lying down. Jiyoon, Yuju, and Gyuri all had moments where they went off sync in some way with the backtrack. This song being so heavily falsetto reliant was always going to be a setup, whether performed live or not. But wow, does this entire song belong in AAVE struggles. On to some actual positive notes. I liked that you could see all of their individual characters from the intro and that they were carried through to the outro as well. I can also understand why this might be people's favorite performance out of the two. It was fun to watch and they all came off as very charming. Jimin did great as the center. I think this was really her best stage of the competition. She really seemed like she was in her element here. I can't comment on her vocals, which is what I tend to focus on because of the not singing live thing, but I feel like we can still hear some of those closed off qualities to her voice, especially when her falsetto chorus is immediately followed by Jiyoon's. To me, it sounds like she lets out too much air during her falsetto, which is a continuation of her issues with breath regulation. But compared to what we've seen so far in the show, I do think she's improved at the very base level. If she continues like this, I think we'll hear a much stronger vocalist by the time the group debuts. Speaking of which, Jiyoon proved why she's the best vocalist on the show, even with the backtrack. Her falsetto was very clear through the backing vocals, and it sounded quite full, especially compared to the rest of the team. Despite her struggles, she also didn't let herself fall behind in the dancing, and I think this was probably her best stage presence in a non-vocal mission, or at least tied with I Am the Best. This song just isn't very vocally challenging aside from the falsetto, so I just can't say too much. Coco is probably a more interesting case. Obviously, dancing and stage presence were good, top 2 in the team at the very least, but her rapping left something to be desired. I think she's probably the biggest victim of the backtrack in this stage. Despite her lip sync being perfect from what I could see, it probably felt the most unnatural of the team. Because it's really her performance that elevates her rapping, that je ne sais quoi was just missing in this performance. Technically a very good performance, but I think it would have been even better for her if the mic was even just open and allowed them to sing into the backtrack. Yuju was also a bit disappointing. This is the first stage since Final Love Song, I think, where we get to hear her actually sing, and her technique leaves a lot to be desired. Like her rapping, she has a problem with projection, and it sounded a bit flat to me. Her second pre-chorus also had a lot of nasality come through. Performance-wise, I don't think she deserves a lot of criticism for her dancing, but her expressions were a bit off. Honestly, I feel like she and Gyuri took on each other's expectations because she came off like, I don't have a better word than goofy and cute, kind of like what Gyuri was giving in Four Walls. Speaking of, I am so proud of Gyuri for how well she did in this stage. Nobody was expecting her to pull it off so well, but I knew she had it in her. Her vocals were very smooth, second after Jiyoon for this stage. Her expressions were so good and her performance overall was just great. It is such a shame the producers didn't let her show off this side of herself until now, but I knew she could do it since Rain on Me. One criticism I do have is her final Sooyoung in the second pre-chorus sounded a bit flat, but overall a very good performance from her. I also want to note that in the post-chorus she was the only person to not use falsetto, opting for more of a mix from what I could hear. Doesn't really affect the final product, just thought it was worth noting if anyone couldn't quite place why it sounded different. My ranking would put them something like Jimin, Gyuri, Jiyoon, Coco, Yuju. For both units, the producers give very generalized feedback pertaining to the songs or performance as a whole, not worth getting into. After spending far too much time reminding people to vote, we cut to a new VCR. You know what I miss from Produce? They would actually tell you the live rankings of the contestants while reminding you to vote. The VCR shows the girls receiving lunchboxes from their family. Along with that are heartfelt notes from whomever prepared the boxes. As the girls read out the letters, they all become varying degrees of emotional. If you do subscribe to zodiacs, the two earth signs, Jimin and Gyuri, were the least emotional out of all of them. We don't get to see all of them read their letters, which is probably for the best, but we do get to see Jimin, Sebi, Coco, Mai, and Jiyoon, which is worth noting in my opinion. After the vote closes, we get some words from the special audience of Wake One Idols. We then cut to a VCR from right after the final interim check, which interestingly, we didn't actually get to see anything from, which adds to the theory that the final 2 episodes of the survival show are meant to present the contestants as debut ready, even if they still have areas they need to improve. As the producers try to leave, they're stopped by the Meta Ball and shown a video that the girls prepared telling them about a surprise. Me personally, I want to note that it was Fuko who not only set the recording up, but also counted them in for the greeting. She's also the one in charge of bringing out the cake. They then present the producers with specially made awards. Monica receives the Island's Mother Award, Lee Jung receives the Heart Attack Award, Vivian gets the Statue Award, 24 then receives the Surprisingly Cute Award. They also present each of them with a customized doll/teddy. Taeyong wasn't present, but he received the You Are So Cool award. We get one last VCR where the girls are presented with books of fan letters and art. This leads us into the final performance of the night, which is I Will Always Love You. There's not really anything to say about this performance. It wasn't live either, the parts distribution heavily favored those who were ranked high in the last vote. It's like the final, you really don't get it yet moment for who will be in the final lineup. We get some final thoughts from the producers, then cut to a VCR of their final night in Island. They stay up talking about the things they'll miss, and then Gyuri comes knocking on the door to Coco, Fuko, and Sebi's room and immediately runs to Fuko's bed while Sebi invites Coco to sleep in hers for a proper sleepover vibe. After reflecting on the ups and downs of Island, we finally reach the final lineup announcement. Usually I would try to mimic some sense of suspense, but I'm not giving anybody any new information, so let's just recap it, yeah? The first debut member at rank number 4 is Coco with 320,124 points. The second debut member at rank number 3 is Jiyoon with 471,699 points. Immediately the gap is noteworthy, and it is very clear the top 3 have an insane amount of numbers on the rest. The third debut member at rank number 2 is Jimin with 591,405 points. Again, we have over 100,000 points between ranks. The fourth debut member at rank number 1 is Jungin with 823,393 points, almost 300,000 points away from rank 2. I don't find these numbers suspicious, but it is insane that there is 500,000 points between rank number 1 and rank number 4. As much as I've seen people conspiring that Mnet really meant to consolidate votes for Jungin by giving her a struggle, I don't think this was planned in any way. Jungin ranking first didn't go against their plans, but a little part of me believes that if the ranks were reversed, if Jimin was first and Jungin second, they would have done their classic top 2 showdown. Like, is it just me that feels like her ranking was really undercut? The reason why they do the showdown is because usually the top 2 is really obvious once you have rank 3 and 4, because very few trainees would have the popularity to surpass them. So we know as soon as Jiyoon is announced, it's definitely between Jimin and Jungin. The suspense is in finding out which one got rank 1. But now, with them announcing Jimin's rank first, all sense of suspense is lost. Be honest, based on previous votes, previous rankings, fandom discussions, did you ever for a second think someone out of Sarang, Yuzu, Gyuri, Fuko, Mai, or Sebi could realistically surpass Jimin? This wasn't a Bahi situation where she was kept down by another voting system and her 1 picks miraculously pulled through. It has been well established that the top 3 most popular 1 picks are Jimin, Jiyoon, and Jungin. I think they wanted the publicity of Jimin's storyline to feed off of Eyelid's brand recognition as well. Just imagine the TikToks and social media posts from being rejected for Eyelid to ranking number 1 in Island. Like, the story writes itself, until it didn't. And this is too much of a gap for Jimin to surpass her during the live vote. Doubling or tripling the votes would have just given Jungin even more of a lead. Mnet's not stupid, they know that. I think they were banking on the final number 1 being Jimin up until the last 24 hours before the finale vote closed. Anyways, they do the 2 candidates thing for rank number 5, the final fan vote at rank. Sebi and Sarang are called up and the vibes are immediately weird. Why would you do this knowing the last rank will be determined by the producers? Something's fishy. But anyways, Sarang finishes in 5th with 319,693 points. She's less than 500 points away from Coco in 4th. For some reason, they decided to do a 3 candidates thing for the producers pick, and that was just cruel. They called up Sebi, Mai, and Fuko, which was just playing with Sebi. They were pulling another Yui, because Mai ends up being the final member. See, this is where I put on my clown makeup, because I bought airplane Wi-Fi so I could watch this finale live, and I had just told my friend there was no way they weren't picking Fuko because she had the most to offer to the final group out of the 3. In short, she has the vocals, the dance skills, and the leadership qualities that no one else in the lineup had really exhibited. She was the perfect missing piece, and while I like Mai and initially had her in my lineup, I wasn't upset her name was called, I was just shocked. Because to me, it felt so obvious, and it would have been the least controversial pick to choose Fuko, because most of the viewers had been expecting it since like episode 3. So I put down my phone at this moment, believing nothing more of note would occur, and I went to check the live reactions online. But then new shocked reactions began pouring through, and a 7th member had been announced. See, because I had left the stream as soon as Mai was announced, because the Wi-Fi just honestly wasn't strong enough to handle it and I needed to start preparing for landing, I didn't realize until I rewatched the finale to make this video just how off the vibes were. First of all, look at the reactions when Mai was announced. Usually when something like this is announced, the room erupts into smiles and cheers and clapping. Why do all of Zero Base 1 look like they just saw someone get slapped? Literally none of the producers look happy to announce this. It's weird. I'm not saying there's a conspiracy. I'm just saying this is weird and not a normal reaction to saving someone from elimination. Then they pull another one after Mai does her speech, and Taeyang just goes into the speech about how out of the other two, they really thought the lineup needed this person. And they cut between Sebi and Fuko, who are both in tears and barely holding on, to their moms in the audience. And at the very last moment, I realized their moms were right next to each other. That is so goddamn messy. So while Sebi's mom is crying tears of relief and joy, Fuko's mom is right next to her holding back tears, watching her own daughter break down on stage as she lost out on her dream for the 2nd time. Like, I feel awful trying to be happy for Sebi, but they keep cutting to her mom, and all I can see is Fuko's mom on the side of the screen wiping away her tears. Then, when we cut to the judges panel, Taeyang is the only one who looks truly happy. It's so weird. The vibes are so off. Like, yeah, obviously they would feel bad for the girls who didn't make it, but usually you forget that for the moment you feel happy for those who did, which is very different for the producers as compared to us viewers because they know all of these girls personally. They've watched all of them grow and face challenges, and that happiness should override their guilt or sadness. But it isn't. And that makes the vibes weird. 24 looks like he's at a funeral almost. Vivian just has a blank stare while clapping. Somi looks genuinely distraught. She is not that good of an actress to fake that. Even among the girls, only Jimin and Coco look genuinely happy. The others look a mix of happy and concerned or sad. Just weird vibes all around. Obviously, the IZNA members are all happy for their fellow members and sad for the girls who didn't make it, but a survival show isn't supposed to end on such a low note. We're supposed to cut to the eliminated contestants and see how happy they are for their friends. We're supposed to cut to the mentors and see how proud they are of the team they created. We're supposed to see cheering fans and happy families and contestants who are sad they were eliminated but happy for those who did make it. None of this exists here. And then you realize it's because Fuko has been genuinely sobbing, dry heaving, bawling her eyes out on stage since Sebi mentioned her in her speech. Because Mnet so very cruelly dangled that debut in front of her twice. I can near guarantee if that first producer save had only been between Sebi and Mai, people wouldn't have been nearly as upset. Yeah, some people would have still been pissy about Fuko not even being nominated, but Sebi and Mai rank so similarly on pretty much every scale that it would have been obvious why she wasn't in the running. But then they made her an option, knowing pretty much the entire viewer base had been expecting Fuko's name since the beginning of the show, then teased her as a possible addition again, and then we get to see how much that messed with her in real time. And the entire live audience gets to see it too. In the middle of Gyuri's speech, we cut to Lee Jung bursting out laughing in between wiping her tears. I think it was Chae-sol who was sitting next to Chaeyeon sobbing into her hands. Monica can barely produce a twitch of the lips. Genuinely the only person in that audience who looks happy is Taeyang. It's crazy. As Fuko begins her speech, we see Yeon burst into tears. We see a teary-eyed Yui right next to her. Coco even tears up, and this is supposed to be one of the happiest moments of her life. This is supposed to be such a happy and proud moment, and it just feels so bittersweet. While I am happy for all of the girls and think this is a really good lineup, I can't leave this finale and immediately think, well, not ideal, but still good, like I did when I stopped watching after Mai's announcement. What is it with recent survival shows and not letting their audience be happy about the final lineup? I may not have been thrilled with Kepler's lineup, but the main reason was because of how the Chinese and Japanese contestants had been treated. For Universe Ticket, that entire show was just such a mess. I already knew I wouldn't like the lineup before the finale even aired. Not because of the girls themselves, but because the show didn't give the older girls a fair chance, and I knew the average age would be under 18, which it was. The only survival show finale I've left happy and satisfied with was Queendom Puzzle. This finale was a cruel and unusual punishment. If they had just stopped at Mai, we could have left on a high note. Do not get me wrong, I am happy for Sebi and Mai and the other 5 final members, but damn, did it have to come at the expense of Fuko? Did we really have to put her through all of that just for some suspense? And before anyone starts on it, I did vote for Fuko. I even got my friends to vote for her. I am allowed to criticize how this was handled even if I didn't vote for her. And another thing, I said last episode that the producers choosing popularity over saving Sujong and Juwon is understandable, but the stakes were very different in the finale, where you actually do expect the producers to go against one-pick popularity, because otherwise what's the point in having producers pick? We also can't ignore the fact that Fuko having a low 1 pick doesn't make her any less popular overall. She got 6th place in the last elimination, about 200,000 points behind Sebi and about 300,000 points ahead of Sarang. And there is no doubt in my mind she would have been top 3 in the first save vote where there was a 6th pick. I know it's been about 84 years and I'm late to the party, but that doesn't change the fact that Fuko should never have been presented as an option for producer pick if they didn't intend on debuting her. This has literally created spiteful solo stand behavior from my Fuko and Sarang fans. Most of all, just seeing people say Fuko was debut ready triggers mostly my stance to start saying, well, why didn't you vote for her? She lost, get over it, she's just not popular. And I get why they're defensive. Mai got a lot of unwarranted hate after the announcement, but someone simply empathizing with Fuko and mourning her lost opportunity is not the same as the people who started spewing hate towards Mai, which, given I was watching live reactions, most people didn't turn to vitriol until after Mnet gave her a mental breakdown on stage. She was fine up until that second announcement, and so were most of the fan base. And also, because it keeps coming up, stop saying a group has enough vocalists. If there's 4 members, we should have 4 competent vocalists. If there's 6, there should be 6. 12, there should be 12. Are we suddenly not listening to the song? Do we just not want them to sound good overall? But either way, we have to stop pitting the girls against each other and realize that the real enemy is Mnet and Taeyang. And yes, I am specifically calling him out because why the hell was he ignoring Fuko during her speech? Anyways, good luck to Isna. Good luck to Yuju, Fuko, and Gyuri. Good luck to the other 14 eliminated contestants. I really hope this isn't the last we see of them, and I think it would be really nice to see some of them debut together after all of this. And I am hoping beyond hope that a company sees how much love we have for Fuko and gives her a chance. I am working on a follow-up video to this, so do stay tuned for that. I can't promise anything with regards to when to expect it, but I kind of need Isna to debut first so I can finalize it. Or, well, I don't need them to debut, but it would be nice to have a confirmation of their sound before releasing it, but I have a very rough idea of what to expect. Please don't make me do this again.